PEC Education is one of the leading PTE test training providers in Dhaka, Bangladesh. PEC Education started its journey in 2016 with providing one-stop PTE academic supports and services. There are several PTE courses that PEC offers both online and on campus to its students. All of the PTE courses includes PTE study materials and free PTE mock tests. Please call for detailed information PTE course preparation and services to 01713167969 or visit the website www.pecpte.com.
Our memories are sometimes unreliable, and though we still don't know precisely what causes this fallibility on a neurological level, research has highlighted some of the most common ways our memories diverge from what actually happened. The Mall study highlights how we can incorporate information from outside sources, like other people or the news, into our personal recollections without realizing it. This kind of suggestibility is just one influence on our memories. Take another study, in which researchers briefly showed a random collection of photographs to a group of participants, including images of a university campus none of them had ever visited. When shown the images 3 weeks later, a majority of participants said that they had probably or definitely visited the campus in the past. The participants misattributed information from one context, an image they'd seen, onto another, a memory of something they believed they actually experienced. In another experiment, people were shown an image of a magnifying glass and then told to imagine a lollipop. They frequently recalled that they saw the magnifying glass and the lollipop. They struggled to link the objects to the correct context, whether they actually saw them or simply imagined them.
The speaker presented a topic about how people tend to recall incorrect memories. He also mentioned some of the researches that were conducted to know the reasoning behind this factor. One such study concluded that we tend to mix external factors into our memory. And another study stated how pictures can influence our memories, making us experience something which we actually have not. Therefore, memories of a person can be quite unreliable.
One evidence-based way to better remember what you've learned is through spaced repetition, or spacing out your learning and practice of new knowledge or skills. Although this might seem novel, this is hardly a new concept. It was first described in 1885 by a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus. Here's how it works. Say you plot your attention, or how much you remember of something, versus time. Now you learn that something on day 0. Without reviewing it, the forgetting curve will look like an exponentially decaying curve, which is kind of scary. If you review, or better yet, actively retrieve the material at increasingly spaced intervals after learning it, then the forgetting curve starts to flatten out, and you'll get a lot better long-term retention. Now, the goal here is to review the material at the right time. It turns out that the best time to revisit information that you're trying to learn is right around the time that you would naturally forget it. Since forgetting typically follows this exponential curve, the trick becomes timing your study sessions around it. Practically, this means having more widely spaced intervals between study times for the material that you're more familiar with, and shorter intervals between study sessions for material that you're less familiar with.
The lecturer talks about a new method of recalling newly learnt information known as spaced repetition. But it is not a new concept, as it has been first introduced in the 1880s by a German psychologist. The way to follow this technique of remembering is by plotting a curve showing how much we are able to remember against time. And mostly checking when we are more likely to forget. Thereby, if we can plan our study time accordingly, it will prove to be the most effective.
Scientists use a technique known as Psychomotor vigilance tasks, or PVTs, to understand the impact of sleep deprivation on humans in studies. Simply put, it's a reaction test. A red button randomly turns green, and people have to push it as fast as possible. Not so surprisingly, those who get 8 hours of sleep over a 2-week period show very few lapses in attention and no cognitive declines. But those groups that receive either 6 or 4 hours of sleep see declining PVT results on almost a daily basis for the entire 2-week period. Of course, the 4-hour group performs the worst. But these results don't just show a loss of concentration, they show full lapses in awareness called microsleeps. In other words, their brains aren't just slower, but shutting off for moments at a time. When looking at the results deeper, scientists concluded that getting 6 hours of sleep for 10 days in a row was the same as not sleeping for 24 hours straight. That's the same cognitive decline as being legally drunk. And if you get 4 hours of sleep for 11 days, it's like you haven't slept for 48 hours straight.
The lecturer presents a technique to understand the impact of sleep deprivation on human. It is a very simple technique as it just tests the reaction time of people. But the sample is divided into distinct groups. The group that gets the most hours of sleep shows the best result. But groups with less amount of sleep shows memory lapse in certain places, like their brain goes off at random times for a brief interval. This activity can be compared as being drunk.
Essentially, when the brain sees something that's novel, it has to burn more energy to represent it because it wasn't expecting that. This feeling that things are going in slow motion is a trick of memory. In other words, when you're in an emergency situation, a part of the brain called the amygdala comes online. This is your emergency control center. It lays down memories on what amounts to a secondary memory tract. These are very dense memories. And you're noticing everything around you and writing it all down. So when the brain reads that back out, there's such a density of memory there that the brain's only conclusion is that must have taken a long time. And I think this offers an explanation for why people think that time seems to speed up as they grow older. And it's because when you're a child, everything's new to you. You're figuring out the rules of the world. You're writing down a lot of memory. And so when you look back at the end of a year, you have a lot of memory of what you've learned. But when you're much older and you look back at the end of a year, you're probably doing approximately the same stuff you've been doing for the X number of previous years. And so it seems like the year just went by in a flash.
When presented with something new or unexpected, our brain tends to work extra hard to register that stuff. Our brain perceives everything newly when we are young, and notes them all down in our memory. And that takes quite some time. This is a reason why time seems to move fast as people get older, as they continuously keep doing the same thing repetitively for multiple years and there is nothing new to register. Basically, the year seems to go by in a flash.
Too often in marriage, we make sacrifices and we demand them without reckoning their cost. But there is wisdom in looking at the price tags attached to our marital decisions in just the way that divorce law teaches us to do. What I want is for people to think about their marital bargains through the lens of divorce and to ask, how is marriage a sacrifice, but an exchange of sacrifice? How do we think about our exchange? Second, how do we think about childcare and deal with the fact that there is no such thing as free childcare? How do we deal with the fact that some things can be separate and some things can be together, and if we don't think about it, then it will all be part of the joint enterprise. So basically, what I want to leave you with is that in marriage or divorce, people should think about the way that till death do us part, marriage is forever.
The speaker elaborates on the consequences of divorce and its effects on the people involved. He wants us to look at the significance of marriage in the same vision as divorce laws are stated. In that manner, we will learn to value more about the sacrifices we make for our family and look at the bigger picture, which includes children and other family members as well as other aspects of our lives. Lastly, the speaker desires that we give more attention to the breaking of marriage just like its forming.